All right, so we're deep diving into Biocon Limited today.
Yeah.
And they're making some pretty bold moves in the biopharmaceutical world. We've got info on their three main areas: generics, biosimilars, and research services. But their recent financials are kind of a mixed bag. Flat revenue growth, and they even reported a net loss. So are they struggling, or are they setting themselves up for something bigger?
Well, it's interesting. Each of their segments tells a different story. You can't just look at the overall revenue number.
Okay, so let's start with generics then. This segment seems to be facing some challenges. Pricing pressure and a planned facility shutdown. Not great conditions for growth.
Not really, no. Generics is a tough market, lots of competition. But Biocon isn't just giving up. They're launching new products, like liraglutide in the UK. It's a weekly injectable for diabetes. That's a big one. And injectables in the US, which is a huge market. Plus, they're expanding into new areas like the Middle East and Brazil, playing both offense and defense.
That sounds risky, though. Could spreading themselves thin backfire, especially with those issues in their existing generics business.
It's a valid concern. Expansion can be a double-edged sword. It takes a lot of investment and resources. If those new ventures don't work out, it could hurt their financial performance.
All right, let's move on to biosimilars then. Things seem a bit more exciting there. Now, for those who might not know, biosimilars are basically the generic versions of those super expensive biologic drugs, like antibodies and proteins, the cutting-edge stuff. They're becoming a big deal in pharmaceuticals, offering more affordable treatments without sacrificing quality.
Exactly. And Biocon seems to be doing well in this area. They've reported year-on-year market share growth for key biosimilars in the US. That's a huge win. Plus, they're not just focused on one market. They've launched 15 new products in other regions, like bevacizumab and pegfilgrastim in Saudi Arabia. Those target specific needs in cancer care and chemotherapy support. A growing area, especially in a market with potentially less competition.
So, strategically picking their battles. But they've also mentioned increased competition in this market. How secure is Biocon's position, really?
Well, they're definitely not standing still. They're launching denosumab and ustekinumab biosimilars soon, which are used for things like osteoporosis and plaque psoriasis, and they're consolidating their recently acquired Viatris business. That gives them a wider portfolio and stronger manufacturing capabilities. This vertical integration, controlling everything from development to production, is a key advantage for them.
So they're trying to build a fortress in the biosimilars market. Makes sense, considering the growth potential. Okay, now let's talk about something that really caught my eye. Research services. Biocon's subsidiary Syngene is doing some cool stuff here. They conducted over 60 audits in just 6 months, a 36% jump year on year. That's not just growth, it's a surge.
Yeah, that jump tells us that Syngene is becoming a sought-after partner. And it's easy to see why. They're moving into cutting-edge areas, like antibody-drug conjugates, which are basically super-targeted missiles delivering drugs right to cancer cells. Also, peptides and oligonucleotides, these are complex, high-demand areas of research. And Syngene is positioning itself at the forefront.
And they're not just researching. They're repurposing a biologics manufacturing facility to start operations soon. Feels like they're going all in here. Could this research arm be Biocon's secret weapon?
It has that potential. Expanding Syngene's capacity allows Biocon to tap into a wider range of research opportunities, like adding new tools to their toolbox. This diversification strategy could lead to new discoveries, partnerships, and revenue streams. It's definitely a smart move, especially with those challenges in generics. But we can't forget about their financials. Biocon reported a net loss recently, even though their core EBITDA margin is still strong at 28%. How do we make sense of that?
Yeah, that net loss is a bit of a head-scratcher.
Yeah.
They did mention refinancing their long-term debt on better terms. Seemed like a good step towards financial stability. And they're saying we'll see accelerated growth in the next few months. What do you think? Are they over-promising, or are they really turning things around?
It's a bit of a balancing act, isn't it? They're juggling these expansions in biosimilars and research services while trying to stabilize their generics business. A lot depends on how well they execute. And the regulatory landscape plays a big role, too.
Oh, speaking of regulations, Biocon mentioned some hurdles with their facilities in Bengaluru and Malaysia.
Yeah.
How big of a setback is that?
Well, regulatory hurdles are just part of the game in this industry, especially when you're dealing with complex manufacturing for biologics and biosimilars. Any delays can have a ripple effect on timelines and revenues. Remember, they need approvals in key markets like the US and Europe, and those aren't easy to get. Biosimilars have to go through rigorous testing to prove they're comparable to the originals. It's a long and complicated process.
And even with approvals, they still have to convince doctors and patients to choose their biosimilars over the established brand names. Building that trust is another challenge altogether.
Absolutely. They have to show a consistent track record of quality and safety. Look, Biocon's success with products like Ogivri and Fulfilla in the US shows they can compete at that level. But the game is always changing. The stakes keep getting higher.
I'm also curious about their focus on emerging markets, like Saudi Arabia and Latin America. Is that a way to avoid some of the competition in the bigger markets?
I think it's a smart move. These regions have a growing demand for healthcare, including biosimilars, and often the competition from big pharma isn't as strong there. It's a way for Biocon to diversify their revenue, gain a foothold in new areas, and ultimately expand their global reach.
Okay, let's go back to research services for a second. Syngene, you mentioned they're getting into advanced fields like ADCs. What does that mean for the bigger picture?
I think this investment in Syngene shows a shift in strategy for Biocon. They don't want to just be a biosimilar manufacturer. They want to be a major player in drug discovery and development. They're moving up the value chain.
So from copying existing drugs to potentially discovering new ones, that's a big jump.
Exactly. And by offering research services, they're not just targeting patients and healthcare providers, they're going after big pharma companies too. Think about it. These companies might want to outsource some of their research and development, and Syngene could be the partner they
So
need.
they could collaborate on new drug discoveries. That's a whole different game.
Right. And it brings in a new type of revenue, one that's potentially more stable and less dependent on the success of individual drug launches. But let's be realistic. This kind of expansion needs a lot of investment and expertise. Do they have what it takes?
That's the big question. Syngene's track record looks good. They've shown they have expertise in different areas. But scaling up to meet the demands of a global market, that's a whole new challenge, especially competing against those established research organizations, the big players in the field.
They are playing catch up, there's no doubt about that. Building a reputation for quality, reliability, and innovation, that's going to be crucial for Syngene if they want to succeed in this competitive environment.
Okay, we've covered a lot, from the ups and downs of generics, to the potential of biosimilars, to this ambitious move into research services. But let's bring it back to the listener for a second. What does all this mean for someone trying to understand Biocon and where they're headed?
Well, I think the takeaway is Biocon is a company in transition, going through a major strategic shift. They're making big bets on biosimilars and research services.
Hmm.
While dealing with those challenges in their generics business, it makes them a really interesting case study. For anyone interested in how the global pharmaceutical industry is changing.
They're definitely a company to watch, but their journey also reflects some bigger trends in the pharmaceutical world, right?
Absolutely. The rise of biosimilars is disrupting the traditional landscape, shaking things up, offering patients more affordable access to important treatments. But it's also forcing the big pharma companies to rethink their strategies, adapt to a new reality.
It's almost like David versus Goliath, with companies like Biocon challenging the big guys.
There's definitely some of that. Biocon and other biosimilar manufacturers are showing that it's possible to develop and produce high-quality biologics at a much lower cost. This puts pressure on the innovator companies to either lower their prices or find new ways to stand out.
And in the end, it's the patients who benefit.
Right.
More affordable treatments, greater access to life-saving medications.
In theory, yes, more competition should lead to lower prices and wider access. But it also raises some questions about innovation and the sustainability of the industry as a whole.
That's a good point. If companies can't rely on those blockbuster drugs with long patents, how will they fund research and development for new therapies?
That's the challenge, finding that balance between affordable access to existing treatments and encouraging the development of new ones. It's a complex issue with no easy answer.
And Biocon is right in the middle of it all, trying to navigate these changes.
They are. Their success or failure will have a big impact, not just for them, but for the whole biosimilar market and the future of healthcare. It's a fascinating story to follow, and one we'll be watching closely in the coming years.
So to wrap things up, Biocon is at a crossroads, making some bold moves. It's too early to say how it will all turn out. What's the one key insight you would leave our listener with today?
You know what strikes me about Biocon? They really embody this shift happening in the whole pharmaceutical industry. The rise of biosimilars, the pressure on drug prices, that constant need for innovation. These are all forces shaping healthcare's future. And Biocon's story gives us a glimpse into how these forces are playing out on a global scale.
It's like a reminder that pharmaceuticals are constantly evolving. It's not just science. It's about business, regulations, the global market. The stakes are high.
Exactly. And for anyone really digging into Biocon, I'd say watch how they handle these challenges. Can they keep up their momentum in biosimilars while also fixing their generics business? Will their investment in research services pay off? And maybe the biggest question, can they carry out these ambitious plans and stay financially stable?
Yeah, those are the key questions. They're taking risks, and it's not a sure thing. They could hit roadblocks. But there's also massive potential for growth and innovation.
There is. And that's what makes their story so interesting. It's about ambition, risk, and the constant pursuit of success, both scientific and commercial.
It's a story that's still being written, and we'll be here to help you understand it as it unfolds. So keep digging deep, keep asking those tough questions, and let us know what you find. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Biocon Limited.